Genesis 36 and 38 is where we're going to, what we just finished. Now we're going to go into Genesis 37 and 39. So we want to start with Joseph's story. And so he kind of had this piece in 37, but then it was going to be interrupted by 38 with Judah and Tamar and that story. And so we decided to put these stories together. So Genesis 37, and then we've already covered 38, which was Judah, and then we're going to get into 39. But we finally made it to Joseph's life here. So we get to just spend time just looking at Joseph's life without any interruptions. We just did in this order to make it a little bit, flow a little bit better for these lessons. So in Genesis 37, that's where we're going to start. We're going to pick up where we left off. If you remember, Jacob has a bunch of sons. We're going to go back a little bit in history, so the sons are going to be a little younger again. If you remember by the story of Judah, Judah was all grown. He had a wife who even died in that story, and so in that narrative time. So it spanned quite a bit of time. But here we're going to go back to when the boys, those 12 sons and one daughter, are all a lot younger, and kind of pick up that story where it is. And again, at this point, Joseph is probably early teenage years, somewhere around that or in that age range. And then we'll kind of pick up, and I'll try to add his age as we go through the story to kind of give it some grounding. But in general, we're going to start into his whole narrative. And the rest of Genesis is primarily going to be centered around Joseph, the son that's going to save the family and the whole world at this point, that known world area, from a massive famine that's going to come through. And so his whole life is going to be a setup for that. So let's start in Genesis 37, verse 1. It says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. So all of Jacob and his sons are in Canaan, which is in the promised land, and they're living there. And it says, Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Okay, so Joseph is on the younger end of the brothers, and so he's 17 at this point, which means most of his brothers, except for Benjamin, who's quite a bit younger, and so he is with his brothers, and then also with Bilhah and Zilpah's sons, the two concubines. So we're not quite sure if Leah's sons are involved in this or not. We know Rachel only has one other son, but this would have been quite a number of his brothers, if we remember that story. They had a few different boys. And so as we'll see, some of Leah's sons will actually be a part of this story too, Reuben and Judah. And so they're all out tending the flocks, and Joseph is supposed to go check on them. And he comes home and he tells his father a bad report, like things aren't good. So we don't know what that bad report is, if they're not doing well with the sheep or if they're just being difficult to him. Whatever it is, he's the young 17-year-old, and his father trusts him, and he's talking poorly about whatever's going on with the family business. So Joseph, at this point, is going to be sold into slavery at 17. He will be 30 years old before he interprets the dream of Pharaoh. So that will be a 13-year time period where he's enslaved and moving from slavery to prison and other things. That's a long time. Then 7 years of plenty and 2 years of famine. And he'll be separated from his brothers a total of 22 years. So I'll probably say this a few times, that it's going to be a long separation with his brothers and his dad. Jacob was 91 at Joseph's birth. So at this point, he's already 108. So Jacob is quite old, and he will be 130 when he arrives in Egypt and 147 when he dies. So Jacob is quite advanced in years already. That may be why he sent one of his sons to go check on the flocks and the other sons. And Joseph was the last of the 11 sons. Probably in that 10-year window when they were having lots of sons, they had them all really close together. And so these sons would have been just a bit older than him. There wouldn't, up to 10 years in that window of age. But generally there would be some sons closer to his age and some a little further. So verse 3 says, Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So this may include why he's bringing a bad report. They may be treating him terribly. So this is the kind of contention we've seen in the family all along. We saw Leah and Rachel fighting over the affection of Jacob. And now we're seeing the sons fighting over the affection of Jacob. He only gives one of his sons an ornate robe. He was a rich man, and why he chose not to do that for his other sons, we don't know. But he definitely did favor Rachel and now Joseph. And there's probably a lot of animosity between the mothers, and now there's a lot of animosity between the sons as well. This is not a good family situation, and Jacob doesn't seem to try to help it at all. So he and Joseph both feed into this family situation. And at this point, we have to remember there's some other things that we've had go on. He's already had major falling outs with Simeon and Levi. And so again, this is just stirring up more family contention and issues that are going on that aren't necessarily being handled. We'll kind of see the same family dynamic in David's life. David was a mighty ruler, had a heart after God, but his family life was typically really messy. So in verse 5, it said Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in a field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. So we could stick on this theme of how much his brothers hated him, and maybe Joseph shouldn't have been at 17 sharing his personal dreams and ambitions with a bunch of people that hated him. That probably wasn't the best place. Maybe just his father or someone. But what I do want to key in on here is that Joseph had a dream. Dreams were part of the patriarchal line. We've seen Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Others in this line, especially Jacob, have a dream where God is communicating something to them. In some of those dreams, they're having visions or encounters where God is speaking directly to them. In this case, this is a very pictorial or metaphoric dream that has to be interpreted. And what we see is that the minute Joseph tells it to his brothers, they immediately know what the interpretation is. What is this that you're going to intend to reign over us? They knew that he was telling them this because he was saying, this is a God-given dream of my destiny and purpose. And they're basically rejecting that. And they're saying, I don't care if it's God or not, and they're blaming him for it. And he has favor in his life. He has favor from his dad and from God, and that makes them hate him. And so, again, we do see this in a lot of our own lives, right? When we get favor just by the hand of God, and it might come with a special robe, or it might come with a special position, or it might come with God speaking to us, whatever it might be, and others get jealous of that. And there was no parenting here by Jacob to help with any of this that we're seeing. And as they're having this dialogue, the dream isn't being questioned. The brothers don't go, "Oh, that dream wasn't from God." They immediately take it seriously. They take it seriously, and it stirs their heart to even more hate. And so we see that dreams were a part of their culture, and not only could Joseph interpret dreams, but so could his brothers. This was a part of their family legacy and heritage. And so I want to bring this in because sometimes we get so stuck into what can happen now in the New Testament, in the life of the church, and those types of things. We don't look back all the time and realize that dreams and interactions with God were kind of normative in the Old Testament, before the Old Covenant and before the New Covenant, and back in the time when God is interacting with his people that he wanted to communicate with. And so this was a very natural thing that Joseph would know how to interpret dreams. And again, if they didn't take this seriously, it wouldn't have been a big deal. They would have just been, "Oh, that was a dream. Okay. Too much pizza last night." We're kind of dismissive at times. But in this, especially in that culture, in that time period, they took these things seriously as being from God. So again, we've also seen some dreams given to Gentiles, right? To Abimelech, the king that God wanted to speak to. So it's not just for the elect people that or the chosen line that God's speaking to. He's speaking to people even around them. He warns Laban, right, in a dream, don't say anything bad or good about Jacob. He takes care of things through his speaking in dreams at night. And so it is part of the way God communicates with people, and it has been from the very early times. Then in verse 9, it says he had another dream and he told it to his brothers. So I think this is where we start to question, maybe because Joseph's 17, but why would he tell his brothers after the first dream just made them mad? He got a robe that made them mad. He has his dad's favor, God speaking to him. He says, "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brother, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So again, this stokes jealousy with his brothers and more hard feelings. So you would think that you'd start to learn that this isn't a very safe family to share things in, especially with the brothers. Now his dad, harshly speaks against this. Who do you think you are? But his father kept this matter in mind, meaning he believed it in a certain sense. But we'll know that he doesn't believe it in the sense that he thinks that Joseph dies. So he thinks that this dream is dead at some point. So his faith only goes so far. These are both symbolic dreams. They're both going to need interpretation. They both had his family members, not just his brothers, but also his parents, right? It says in this one, the sun, moon, and 11 stars. Very specific. There were 11 stars. He has 11 brothers. That the sun, moon, and stars are bowing down to him. And so we just see that includes his parents. That's kind of a hard statement possibly for a parent, that you're going to end up having to be subservient to one of your children, especially when his father is supposed to be the head of the household. Again, the having two dreams, we'll find out later, that have the same thing in them means this is firmly established by God. That's what Joseph will tell Pharaoh in Genesis 41:32. So we don't know if Joseph believes that at this point, that having a double dream means that it's firmly established. But we do know as time goes on, that's how he starts to understand that if you dream it twice, it's a sure thing, and God's going to make it happen. So if God only said it once, well, maybe there might be something in that. But then if it's said twice, it's an absolute sure thing. And so now we're going to have to be left with, what do we do with this? Because Judah is going to be the promised kingly line, but it sounds like everybody's going to be bowing down to Joseph. Well, we know in this short time period, throughout their actual lives, Joseph seems to be the one that rises to power, the one that the family has to follow, not Judah necessarily. So again, Joseph will get the double portion. There'll be more wealth going to him than the other sons, but at the same time, Judah will get the kingly line. And so those are from the two different mothers, Leah and Rachel, the two sons. And so we'll see that kind of play out. And that's part of the reason the rest of Genesis is devoted to Joseph, because right now he's going to stand out as the son that's carrying some part of the covenant promise, which is to bless the whole earth or all the nations. So in verse 12, it says, "Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, 'As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them.' 'Very well,' he replied. So he said to him, 'Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me.' Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron." Okay, this is interesting. This is the second time Joseph isn't with his brothers taking care of the sheep. He obviously has some sort of status to be able to stay back and not have to work in the same way. His brothers are out in the elements, having to do things, and he's just being sent as a messenger. Now, it might be because he's the youngest. We actually see David in a couple of cases kind of being treated the same way as a messenger when his brothers are out at the front line of the war where Goliath is taunting them. We'll see David show up to check on them or bring them supplies. This is also kind of a dangerous thing for Joseph at this point. His brothers hate him, and the last time he went, he returned with a bad report. So things haven't gone well when his father sent him to do this in the past. So this is kind of questionable. The whole family dynamic at this point is pretty much broken down. It's a really bad situation. This seems like a pretty unwise plan. Again, there isn't like moral commentary here, but in general, I think we can see that there's just kind of a lack of wisdom, sharing dreams and goals that are going to cause other people to have to bow down to you. There's probably some sensitivity. Even the most loving and caring people around us might have trouble if we said that to them, right? So Joseph is having to deal with these complicated family situations. And I don't want to put all this blame on Joseph at all, because his brothers do what's really wrong. We've already seen Simeon and Levi be terrible and destroy a whole village. And we also have seen Reuben take one of his father's concubines and try to assert his head of household with her. So again, this just seems like there's this level of animosity that just keeps ratcheting up here. So when Joseph arrives at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the field and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So his brothers are not in a good spot. They've let jealousy and things and bitterness just grow in their hearts. They've come to the place where this is full-on hate and murder now. They are willing to actually take action. And we know that some of his brothers have, like I said, slaughtered villages and things. So this is not outside of where they are. This is a bunch of young men without anyone overseeing them or bringing any sense to this situation. They're probably, like I said, between the ages of 17 and 27. So there's not a lot going on here that's good. And Joseph doesn't even have the chance to show up before they already hate him and want to take him out. So Jacob should have understood this. His brother Esau had wanted to kill him. At one point, we also know that the story of Cain and Abel would have been told. So this is not a new problem with brothers and the animosity between them. They just want to get rid of Joseph in his dreams. But in the end, all the actions they're going to take are actually going to end up fulfilling the dream. So by what they're going to do, the dream will actually end up happening. So in verse 21, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Reuben was the oldest, so he would have been probably closer to 27. So he has a little bit more sense. Let's not kill him. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So Reuben's like, there's no point in killing him. Let's not do this. Like, Reuben's the older brother, lots of sense. Hey, younger brothers, just put him in the well for a while. Reuben was thinking that he could go drag him out and take him back home and handle this problem with his dad. Reuben is the least threatened by his younger brother. He just doesn't seem to be bothered by the 17-year-old who's been telling him their dreams and shooting off his mouth kind of idea, right? Like, Reuben kind of is the one that is like, yeah. Now, Joseph doesn't know any of this conversation or the actual dynamic going on. All he knows is, in general, all of his brothers want him dead. He doesn't know that Reuben stood up for him. He doesn't know any of that. So the plan is they want to kill him. Reuben's trying to step in. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So it's a deep hole. They put him in there. So Reuben's plan worked. Whatever Reuben said to them, they're following through on that. They didn't just outright murder him. They threw him in a hole. So in verse 25, as they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. So Ishmael was Isaac's, the first brother, right? And so he's had a bunch of children at this point, and they've made the Ishmaelites. And so they're traveling around the area. The Ishmaelites kind of live in and among them. And so they're coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. So this caravan has a bunch of stuff loaded from the promised land, and they're heading down south to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So we find out here that it's not just Reuben that wanted to save his life. Judah also didn't want to kill him. Judah's like, you know what, to get out of this, he's sitting in the cistern. If we let this go on too much longer, probably Simeon, Levi, or some of the other ones that wanted to murder him, they're going to have their way with him. They're going to kill him. And this is going to be really bad. Let's just sell him. Let's get some money out of it. Like, this is an easy out. So it looks like Judah is also thinking as hard as he can. How can I help him out? How can I get him out of here? And Judah's the fourth in line. So he's between, 17 and 27. So let's say he's 22 or so. Like, he's starting to make some good choices here, kind of where Reuben is. Now, Reuben and Judah aren't talking, so they don't know. And Joseph doesn't know any of who is helping him and who isn't. All he knows is the whole lot of them dumped him in this hole. So Judah saves Joseph's life, but he sells him into slavery. And we'll find out that Joseph never really leaves slavery. We know he gets promoted under Pharaoh, but even when he's promoted under Pharaoh, he's still in the position of running the country, and he's not allowed to even leave or do anything on his own without Pharaoh's approval. We see something very similar, like in the story of Nehemiah as a cupbearer, or the baker and the cupbearer in this story as well. Under Pharaoh, they can't do anything on their own, and Pharaoh can chop off their heads or take their lives or do whatever he wants anytime he wants. He's Pharaoh, right? So it's pretty terrible. But Joseph, even being promoted into second in the land, is in a sense still a slave of someone. And so as they're selling him into slavery, this is kind of the end of the freedom. They will join him in Egypt and also kind of be under the thumb of Pharaoh. And then eventually all of them will end up in slavery for 400 years, the whole people group. Now, Abraham had already heard that from God, that they would spend some time in slavery before coming into the promised land. And so here we see that start of slavery begin, that this is the way it happens. They sell themselves, their own people group, into slavery. And so again, part of what Judah's doing is trying to take something better, make something better out of this murderous state that his brothers are in. I would think at this point, a few of the brothers just want this to stop. They don't know how they're going to protect Joseph long term. And so selling him just gets him out of the way. So both Judah and Reuben, Judah does the actual rescuing, and Judah will continue to be a prominent figure in all of these narratives. Judah is the one that is carrying the promised kingly line. But again, Judah's going to be the one that needs the protection. It's his children that really need this protecting as he carries that kingly line of the Messiah through his line. And Joseph's going to provide that protection through a famine. And so this is just a very strange thing. The very brother that sells him into slavery and gets him to Egypt is the one that's going to need to be in Egypt to be saved the most. And so again, we're going to see these different brothers. For the most part, speaking roles are only going to be given to Joseph, Reuben, and Judah. And occasionally Benjamin plays into this. But the other 8 brothers don't really end up in the whole lot of it other than just as a group. But we will see them. Judah will be the one that offers himself in place of Benjamin later on when Joseph is testing them in Egypt. See, Joseph does this testing because he doesn't actually know the situation here. He's just in a cistern. He doesn't know which one of them wanted to murder him, which ones wanted to sell him, which ones wanted to save him. He doesn't know any of that. He just thinks they all came up with this plan to sell him. He doesn't know they were trying to kill him and all of that. So again, Joseph really doesn't have all the information. He won't have it for another 20-some years when he meets them again. So in verse 28, it says, when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Now, the Ishmaelites and the Midianites are the same in this narrative. It's just synonyms. 20 shekels of silver is the standard slave price at this time, and we know that from other literature outside the Bible, that they found that, slaves at this time were being sold for 20 shekels of silver. So this is very standard. And then just again, as we remember, where is Joseph headed? He's headed to Egypt. So he's going to be leaving the promised land. If we remember Ham, back at the time of Noah, Shem's descendants stayed more north. Ham's are the ones that created Egypt area and really populated it. So this is really changing completely into a different system of people groups as he goes into Egypt. We've seen Abram go to Egypt during a famine in Genesis 12. We saw Ishmael's mother Hagar was from Egypt. So Abraham had brought her from there. During the time of famine, Isaac was told not to go to Egypt. Joseph now is being sold into slavery in Egypt. So there's this kind of tension with Egypt. Sometimes they go there in a famine. Sometimes they're told not to go there in a famine. Sometimes, Joseph's sent ahead to help supply during a famine so the whole family can go there during the famine. So again, this idea of Egypt keeps coming up. And part of the reason, like I said, Genesis is being written to explain where these nations come from and their roles. And one of the roles of Egypt has been in this almost protector role at times during famines and things as a supply place. It's outside the promised land, but it's a near border to the south. It's one of the places that they kind of seem to have quite a bit of trade between. Now, they've been getting wives from the north, and they kind of get their famine and grain and what they need from the south at times. So verse 29, when Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't there. Where can I turn now? So Reuben, being the head of this group of brothers, is very concerned. What can I do? Like, I have to go tell our father that he's not here. Where did you put him? So it seems like Reuben was away. And in that time that he was maybe off somewhere, they're out taking care of sheep, that the other brothers had conspired to sell Joseph. So not everybody was even in on the plan. But Judah is the one that was the protector at this point and helps get Joseph on his way. Not necessarily the best thing to do, though. Like I said, there's not really a moral high ground here. And yes, this is achieving the protection of them. And we will find later that Joseph does say, what you meant for harm, God meant for good. He took care of me in Egypt. But we don't know if there was a plan A that could have been done here. Is there some other reason Joseph could have just moved, a few years later to Egypt and also had the same thing happen? So again, selling your brother into slavery is probably not the point of the story. It's not condoning or approving of the actions that these brothers are taking, the hatred that's in their heart. Oh, and the protective act of Judah probably still is not the best one, right? We see this in quite a few of the different narratives, that it's very hard to tell if they're doing plan A or if they're just kind of barely making it to keep each other alive here. So Judah was the one that kept Joseph alive without Reuben around. Then in verse 31, then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, look, we found this. So basically, they're going to lie to their father about this. Joseph's been torn to pieces, so Jacob ends up mourning for him. And so again, he's just going to continue weeping. So Jacob is going to suffer this loss for 22 years. We'll just see that he lives in sorrow this whole time. We've already seen that he's already just buried Rachel. He has his young son Benjamin from her. Now Joseph is dead. So he's really lost the ones he really cared about. And he also has had to bury his father Isaac, probably in a decently short period of time here, in a few years. And so this is a lot of loss. Some of the most stable people in his life are gone. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So they pay the brothers for Joseph, and then they drag him down to Egypt, and they sell him off to Potiphar, who is, pretty high ranking and one of Pharaoh's officials. That's a pretty good place. So Joseph is probably in a pretty luxurious house as one of the servants. And so he is now in Egypt, and he is sold into slavery fully. And that's where we kind of see his narrative of Egypt start, of slavery. And the next few chapters are going to be about his time in captivity. And as God continues, how does God bring favor to somebody in captivity? Is that possible? And we will see that with Joseph. So Genesis 39, remember we're skipping Genesis 38. We already covered that. That was about Judah and Tamar, and now we're going to continue now with Joseph. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian, who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Okay, so like I said, this is a pretty simple narrative. We read it, face value. This is exactly what happened. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of the Egyptian master. So Joseph didn't just get taken like to a quarry to build things or to a field to work. He's an indoor servant, and he's over a very nice house. So he probably has a little bit better, we'd hope. I mean, again, as a slave, they could mistreat him however they felt like. So again, we don't know what kind of abuses and things went on in the household. But again, when his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. So Potiphar takes the blessing and favor of God to his benefit, where Joseph's brothers hated him for it. Potiphar leverages to his advantage. So from the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So Joseph was in charge of the fields. He was in charge of the household. It means he's like the general manager of this entire estate. And this estate was to be providing food for all the servants and everybody. And so Joseph is deciding, when they plant, when they harvest, how everything goes, probably over all of that and managing everything. And everything is flourishing. He's seeing returns on investments and everything that he's putting into this. And Potiphar is quite happy with this deal, right? He bought a slave who could have just ended up being like, a normal servant, but Joseph had favor on his life. So Joseph is blessed and has favor on his life wherever he goes. It doesn't really matter what situations he's in. This just keeps happening. And you're seeing the human reaction to it. Some people hate you because of the favor on your life. some people want to use the favor on your life. Again, and it's not necessarily wrong that Potiphar was successful and had extra stuff in this time period. He got to be blessed by Joseph's favor, but it really wasn't Potiphar's. He couldn't own it forever. When Joseph leaves his household, that favor ends up in Pharaoh's place. But Joseph is also learning a set of skills here. He's learning to manage a large set of people, a household and fields and crops and things, which will come in handy later down the road. So Potiphar, so we know that Joseph's life is this blessing is to actually end up blessing the whole world. Potiphar's just one of those people. So now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, she propositions him. And so again, Joseph says, everything that has been entrusted to me of my master, no one is greater in the house than I am. My master has withheld nothing except for you. So he says, this is not right. You're his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And she continued to proposition Joseph day after day, and he refused her. So again, Joseph's not married. He's a single young man. And this wife really wants his affection and attention. And he keeps saying no. And he doesn't just say, this is wrong. He says, I would be sinning against God. There's something that he's learned from his family upbringing, obviously not in Egypt, that this is not the way you do things. It's not how you treat a master that has put you in charge of everything. That's out of bounds. And we've learned that actually from the story of Reuben and Jacob already. Jacob actually was very upset when Reuben did that, when he crossed that boundary into one of his wives. And so again, we see here that this is an important part of seeing who Joseph is and who his character is under trial and testing. He's not giving in to temptation. He's not saying, oh, this is okay. So again, this is just part of seeing his faithfulness to God and to the ways he was brought up, even in a new environment. He could have thrown everything out and said, I'm a slave now. I'm in a different country. I'm going to do something different. And he says, no, I'm still following God, and I'm still going to do it his way. So on verse 11, it says, one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. And she caught him again by the cloak, and again tries to drag him with her. And he ends up leaving his cloak behind because she's holding on to it, and he runs out of the house, right? I'm just paraphrasing a lot of these verses. And she calls out to her servants, look, she said to them, he's making sport of me. And she screamed. And so again, he left his cloak and ran. And she kept the cloak beside her until her master came home. Again, this is a coat, right? Joseph's coat, again, is in the middle of this whole story. She told the Potiphar this whole story, that Hebrew slave you brought came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. So she has Joseph's cloak. He looks pretty incriminated at this point. She falsely accuses him. And Joseph's uprightness is being highlighted in this narrative. And his uprightness is what actually gets him imprisoned. And so again, there are times when people will turn against us, even when we're doing everything right before God, and we're doing everything right even for them. And so this is part of it. We see this in the story of Jesus with Judas. This is a very real part of all of our lives, right? There's people that decide to manipulate, betray, and just generally do us wrong. Potiphar's wife has no remorse here for putting Joseph in prison. That's what she wants. And so again, if she can't control him, then the next best thing is for her is to put him in prison. So in verse 19, when the master heard the story of his wife, he said, this is how your slave treated me. And he burned with anger. So Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So this is a prison for, you'll find out, for the king's people. His baker is there, so obviously made him mad at some point. His cupbearer is there, which would be like the head of his security forces, the one who tastes everything for him, make sure he's not being poisoned. So again, Joseph ends up in that prison. We don't know. It may have been much closer to the palace area or something for political prisoners. But again, he is in prison. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he made him responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So just remember, like, this success and this favor is following Joseph wherever he goes. I do want to stop for a second still and just kind of hit that point again about betrayal, that sometimes we fault people when they get accused or betrayed. We go, well, maybe they did do something wrong. And the answer is no, really, he is in prison, and the favor of God never lifts from him. He didn't do anything wrong in this situation. I remember at one point we were at a church and there was an embezzlement and things weren't going well. And people there had a choice. They could blame it was like an accounting issue with somebody, but they could blame some of the people over that, or again, they could say, you know what, they didn't do anything wrong. They just entrusted somebody that was choosing to do something really bad. And Potiphar's wife here is like that. She's just really choosing to do something horrible to somebody. And again, Potiphar is doing what he thinks. It's the only story he's being told. We don't see that he questions her or anything. This is the story he knows. So we don't really see him that complicit in this. But his wife is. She's the one that did this. And so again, as we walked through that situation in some of the church or this business that they had, it's a difficult place, right? Because you sometimes look at the people and go, well, could we have stopped this? Could we have known? Could Joseph have known or done something differently? Could he have? And the answer is no, not really. Like, we see this, and I think that's why I really appreciate the story of Jesus so much with Judas, is Jesus kind of knew who Judas was, and he was giving him a chance. There's times where there's people that we're giving them a chance, and they're still going to hurt us, or they're going to do terrible things within our systems or businesses. And like I said, I've seen this happen in several businesses or church locations where somebody really does something horrible. And then everybody's questioning, well, maybe the people that hadn't done anything wrong, maybe they should have known. And you're like, wait, Jesus knew some level that something was going on with him, and he still continued to trust him. He still continued to hope that he would do something different. Now, I'm not saying go out of your way to ignore, people who have a criminal background or something. But on the other side of this, at times we may not know everything, right? We may not, or in Joseph's case, he's just in a situation he has no control over, and people are treating him terribly. I tend to think of Joseph a little bit more like, a child in an abusive situation, something like that, where they really don't have a control over that situation. There's not a lot they could have done. And Joseph is in that, and he gets treated terribly, but the favor of God continues to rest on him. Now, I'm not saying this is ideal or good. It is good that he has a favor of God, but it doesn't make up for what the people are doing around him, and they shouldn't be doing it. So injustice is a real part of life, and Joseph in all of this is going to have to handle his heart. First, his brothers have sold him into slavery, and he has a choice. Is he going to hate them? And when they show up later, is he going to kill them and become that kind of person? Potiphar's wife, is he going to try to get revenge when he becomes second in the land? He could have her taken away at that point. Is he going to be mad at Potiphar? Like, maybe he'd have Potiphar killed. Like, he has all kinds of choices later on that we don't see Joseph go down those lines. He's really having to deal with his heart. He's having to deal with when, the cupbearer gets restored to his position. He doesn't tell the Pharaoh for 2 years about Joseph in prison. So again, we just see this in Joseph's story, that people continue to betray him and let him down. And he's continually the one that has to watch his heart in the midst of that, to not blame himself and not blame everybody around him, and step into that bitterness and hatred that his brothers have chosen. So again, we just see here that, again, this prison warden sees a favor on him, and he reacts the other direction, right? He goes more with Potiphar and uses it to his leverage and advantage. Oh, look, I've got someone with a lot of favors, so I can give Joseph all of this stuff to do. So again, that's what we kind of see in Joseph's life. And that's where we're going to end this, is just thinking about Joseph in this position in prison. This is the end of the story for right now. And it kind of is good to leave it here for a little while, because Joseph's going to be sitting in this prison for a while. And he's going to have to deal with what just happened. He thinks all his brothers were against him. He doesn't know all their plans. He didn't hear all the dialogue. And now he's also been betrayed by another person. He could become incredibly cynical at this point. I'm surprised that anyone in this place can be helpful to any warden or take over anything, right? He's been stabbed in the back, as we'd say, over and over. And now it's up to his heart to decide how he's going to deal with this. Is he going to turn on God and hate God for this? There's a lot of options he has. And what we see is he stays faithful to God. he continues on, and he's in pain because he wants out. Like, this is not, like I said, this is not an ideal situation. This is something where he has no control over his life and what's been happening to him for a long time. All he knows is the great favor of God and of his father, and then the hatred of his brothers, and the misuse and manipulations and betrayals by other people. So we're going to just leave it there. Again, if there's anything that comes up with this, if you've been listening and you need to deal with this with you and God about people who have betrayed you or things that have happened in your past where you just don't want to hold on to that bitterness anymore, this is one of those stories I think that brings us to that. And that's really how we apply some of these stories. We read their narratives. We see how they were so faithful to God. I mean, the other takeaway from this one is that Joseph was being tempted pretty heavily, and he didn't give in. He said, it's not because of what man thinks, it's because of what God thinks. And I want to do what's right in my life in front of God. And that's part of the reason the favor is following him, is because he was trying to do his life with God and in front of God. And he says, I don't want secret things. I don't want to have, things going on in the secret. So he was willing to live his life and even confront her when she came after him and say, no, this isn't right with God. And so that's the other side we can look at. And that's part of the reason we go back and we read these narratives, why we say these are applicable to our lives today. That in the questionable moral situations where, they're selling brothers into slavery and stuff, we don't repeat those things. But when we see someone that is following God well and God is showing his favor on them, we do want to repeat those things. And so again, how do we handle betrayal? How do we handle heavy temptation? We are looking at some of that in the life of Joseph. So that's where I'm going to leave us.